She was just my friend's mom. Until she slid her hand over mine, I never noticed the way her eyes lingered. Not really, until that night in the kitchen. It was late, the kind of late where the whole house feels asleep except for the low hum of the refrigerator. My best friend had gone upstairs hours ago, but I'd stayed behind, scrolling absently on my phone, nursing a glass of water I didn't really need. She was rinsing dishes, her back to me, hair falling loose from a clip. I'd known her for years, Mrs. Hale. Always polite, warm, the type to ask if you'd eaten enough or if you were driving home too late. She was the safe background of my teenage summers, someone's mom, someone's wife back then. But her husband had moved out 2 years ago. And now, I was 23, sitting in her quiet kitchen, suddenly aware of how her voice dipped lower when she spoke to me. "You're awfully quiet tonight," she said without turning. I shrugged, a useless movement she couldn't see. "Just tired." She placed a plate in the rack, the water running between us like a curtain. "Tired's one thing. You look far away." I looked down at my hands. "Maybe I am." Silence. The kind that's heavier than words. She turned finally, leaning against the counter, drying her hands on a towel. The soft overhead light caught the faint lines at the corner of her eyes, the kind you only get from laughing a lot, or crying alone. "You've changed," she said, not like it was good or bad, just true. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the way she was looking at me, I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Instead, I said, "So have you?" Her lips parted, just slightly. I didn't mean it in a way that crossed any lines, but maybe I did. I'd been noticing her more lately, the way her sweaters always smelled faintly of something warm and clean, the way she listened with her whole face. My mind kept going back to the night last week when our fingers had brushed passing the salt and neither of us had moved right away. She crossed the small space between us to set a mug on the table. Tea. Steam curling between us. "Couldn't sleep earlier," she said, sliding into the chair opposite mine. "Now I know why." "Why?" Her gaze held mine for a beat too long. "The house feels different when you're here." I didn't know what to say to that. My pulse was steady but too loud in my ears. I picked up the mug, but before I could drink, her hand slid across the table, warm and sure, resting over mine. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't casual. It was a pause. A moment stretched tight. Her thumb traced once over the edge of my knuckle, slow and deliberate, as if testing the idea of this, whatever this was. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. In that small, dim kitchen, the air between us seemed to shift, rearranging the past 5 years in a way that made my chest ache. She was my friend's mom. She wasn't supposed to look at me like that. But she did. The sound that broke it wasn't my voice. It was the sharp ping of her phone vibrating on the counter behind her. She blinked, hand retreating as she stood too quickly. "Sorry, she started, but the words didn't finish. She picked up the phone, glanced at the screen, and her expression changed. I couldn't see the message, but I knew, whatever it wasn't nothing. "If you want, next part we can dive into how his self-consciousness and her regret begin quietly steering their choices while keeping the pacing slow burn." She set the phone face down on the counter, but her shoulders had gone a little stiff. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She glanced over, forcing a small smile. "Yeah. Just nothing important." It was a lie, and we both knew it. I didn't push. We had enough unsaid things between us already. I wrapped my fingers around the mug again, partly for warmth, partly so I'd have something to do with my hands. My mind kept replaying the way her skin had felt against mine, the deliberate pressure, the small movement of her thumb. I shouldn't have liked it as much as I did. She poured herself some tea, sat back down, and for a while, the only sound was the faint clink of her spoon against the mug. "You know," she said after a moment, I keep thinking about when you and Evan used to come home from school, dumping your backpacks by the door, heading straight for the fridge like you hadn't eaten in days. I smirked. That sounds about right. You were so young then. Her eyes softened, but there was something else there, too. Something heavier. You're not anymore. It wasn't just the years she meant. It was everything I'd been through since, the jobs, the failed relationship, the months where I didn't talk to anyone. She didn't know all the details, but she seemed to feel them anyway. The truth was, I'd always liked her. Even back when she was just my friend's mom, there was something about her, the way she made a room feel settled, the way she looked you straight in the eye when she spoke. But liking her now wasn't harmless. It was risky. Not just because she was older. Not just because she was my best friend's mom. But because she still carried the faint shadow of a ring-shaped tan on her finger, and part of me suspected she hadn't decided if she was truly done with that chapter of her life. And yet, I found myself watching her hands as she spoke, tracing the delicate way she stirred her tea. I caught the small lines around her mouth when she smiled, lines I wanted to know better. You're staring, she said quietly, not looking up. Am I? Yes. She finally raised her eyes to mine, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. The kettle on the stove clicked as it cooled, the room holding that peculiar, fragile stillness where anything could happen. She leaned back, exhaling slowly, and then reached for something on the table, the mug I was holding. She didn't take it, just covered my hand with hers again, softer this time, like she was testing the shape of a decision she hadn't made yet. Either of us spoke. But she didn't pull away. Her hand was still over mine when the sound of footsteps creaked on the stairs. She withdrew instantly, sitting back like nothing had happened. My pulse was hammering, and I barely had time to glance toward the doorway before Evan appeared, hair messy, wearing that old hoodie he never took off at night. Hey, he yawned. Why are you guys still up? I swallowed. Just talking. His eyes flicked between us for half a second, then he went to the fridge. She was composed, almost too composed, rinsing her mug like she'd been doing it for hours. You should get some sleep, she said to him, tone light. Yeah, he mumbled, grabbing a bottle of water. Night. When he disappeared upstairs again, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That was close, I muttered. Her eyes met mine briefly before she looked away. It can't happen again. I didn't ask if she meant the hand over mine, the way she'd been looking at me, or the whole thing. It didn't matter. The answer would have been the same. But as I sat there, the air between us thick again, I knew she didn't believe her own words. I should go, I said, pushing back from the table. She nodded but didn't move. When I passed her to get to the door, I felt her hand brush my arm. Whether by accident or design, I couldn't tell. It was enough to make me stop. Her voice was quiet. This isn't simple. I know. We stood there, both of us unwilling to take the next step closer or further away. I could smell her perfume, faint and warm, and I had the irrational thought that if I leaned in, she wouldn't stop me. Then, the sharp chime of her phone again. She reached for it too fast, as if she'd been waiting. Her brows drew together as she read the message. She didn't show me, but her voice was tighter when she spoke. It's him. I didn't need to ask who. Her ex-husband. What does he want? Nothing I can't handle, she said, but her fingers tightened around the phone. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to handle it alone, that I'd stay, but I didn't. Because what were we? I stepped toward the door again. Good night. Good night, she echoed, softer. I left the kitchen, the image of her standing there burned into my mind. I told myself I'd put distance between us. I told myself I'd stop thinking about her. But later, lying in bed, my phone buzzed. A text from her. Are you awake? Her text glowed in the dark like it was daring me. Are you awake? I stared at it for a long time before replying. Yeah. No answer. 30 seconds. A minute. Then, come downstairs. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the heater as I crept down the hall. I half expected Evan to step out of his room, but the door was shut tight. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with the TV on mute, light from the screen washing over her face. You couldn't sleep either? I asked. She shook her head, eyes fixed somewhere past me. I just didn't want to be alone right now. I sat down at the far end of the couch, trying not to look at her bare feet tucked under her. The distance between us felt both too much and not enough. What's wrong? Her voice was quiet, almost reluctant. He's been calling again. Leaving messages. Saying things he never said when we were married. I didn't like the way that made my stomach twist. Do you want me to talk to him? That made her look at me, really look at me. You're not responsible for fixing my past. No, I said, but I care about your present. Her expression flickered, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. You shouldn't, she whispered, and there was no conviction in it at all. The tension in the room thickened, pulling us towards some unspoken line. She glanced at the stairs like she was checking for movement. Evan's asleep, she said, but I heard the subtext, this is dangerous, but no one will know. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You keep saying this can't happen, but you keep calling me back. That's not fair. It's the truth. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Do you think I don't know what people would say? Do you think I haven't thought about how this ends? Her voice was trembling now, and I followed her before I could think better of it. Then tell me to leave, I said. She turned to face me, and for a moment neither of us moved. The space between us was nothing now, just inches, just breath. I can't, she said finally, and her voice broke on it. Her hand lifted halfway, like she might touch my face, but then she stopped, curling her fingers into her palm. I could feel my pulse in my throat. From the top of the stairs, a sudden creak. We froze. She didn't step back. I didn't either. Her eyes searched mine, and I knew, one more second and we'd crossed the line completely. And then, from the darkness upstairs, Evan's voice. Mom? Who are you talking to? My stomach dropped. Just talking, she called back, her voice steady enough to almost fool me. Footsteps came halfway down the stairs before stopping. Oh. Okay. Then Evan's door clicked shut again. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a week. We should. But her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at it, frowned, and this time she didn't flip it over like before. She read the message right in front of me. Her face changed. Color drained from her cheeks, her mouth parting slightly. What is it? I asked. She hesitated, too long, then handed me the phone. It was from her ex. So, you're seeing someone now? Interesting choice. Tell your friends, kid, I said hi. It felt like ice water down my spine. He knows. Her arms crossed, not defensively, more like she was holding herself together. He was at the store earlier. I didn't see him. I guess he saw us. Us? The word hung between us, heavier than I expected. We haven't even, it doesn't matter. He's not above stirring things up. I sank back onto the couch. So what, he's going to tell Evan? Her eyes flicked toward the stairs. Or worse. He could tell people in town. My family. Make it sound like. She didn't finish. The unspoken truth was clear. Make it sound like I was some reckless kid chasing after someone I shouldn't. Or make it sound like she was desperate, pathetic. I can handle people talking about me, I said. She shook her head. It's not just you. It's my son. You're his best friend. This could ruin everything. The room was too small now, the air too close. My mind was spinning, not from fear, but from something sharper, anger at him for holding this over her, anger at her for acting like we were something shameful. Maybe it's not as bad as you think, I offered, but my voice didn't sound convincing, even to me. She sat down beside me, close enough that our knees touched. Her hand hovered for a second before resting lightly on my thigh. You don't understand. He knows how to twist things. He's been doing it for years. And then, softer, I don't want to lose you. That cut through everything, the risk, the fear, the careful boundaries. You won't, I said. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it, but then the sound of a phone ringing upstairs, Evan's this time, made her flinch. A few seconds later, muffled through the ceiling, I heard his voice. Hey, Dad? Her eyes closed. We both knew, whatever safety we'd had was gone. I could hear Evan's low voice through the ceiling, but I couldn't make out the words. She was sitting perfectly still beside me, like any movement might make this all collapse faster. He's telling him, I said quietly. She shook her head, but her jaw was tight. No. Not yet. But it's coming. A part of me wanted to storm upstairs, grab the phone, and end this myself. Another part knew that would make everything worse. She finally turned to me. We could stop this right now, she said, voice breaking just enough for me to hear the cost of the words. If we end it before it's really started, there's nothing to ruin. You think we can undo this? I asked. Pretend we didn't feel it? Her gaze locked on mine, steady but sad. It would be easier. Easier isn't the same as better. Something in her eyes flickered, maybe the regret she always carried, maybe the longing she tried to hide. She reached up, fingers brushing my cheek like she was testing the temperature of a fire. I'm scared, she admitted. I caught her hand before she could pull it away. So am I. But I'm more scared of not doing this. Her breath hitched. Evan, I know. He's my best friend. And maybe he'll hate me for this. But if I walk away now, I'll hate myself. Her eyes shone, but she didn't look away. The air between us was heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then, upstairs, a door closed. Heavy footsteps started down the stairs. Her hand slipped from mine. You need to choose, she whispered. The truth was, I already had. I stood as Evan reached the bottom step. He glanced between us, something unreadable in his eyes. Dad says hi, he muttered, then headed for the kitchen without another word. She looked at me, the faintest trace of panic and hope tangled together. I stepped toward her, close enough that only she could hear me. Whatever happens, I'm not walking away. Her eyes closed briefly, like the words were both a relief and a sentence. And then, the faintest brush of her fingers against mine, hidden from view, deliberate. No one else in the room would have noticed. But it was enough. Evan moved around the kitchen, opening the fridge, pouring cereal like it was any other night. My pulse was still racing, but I forced myself to sit back down, to act like nothing in this room was unusual. She stayed on the couch, eyes on the muted TV, her body perfectly still except for the way her thumb tapped once against her leg, a small, restless signal I'd learned to notice. When Evan finally headed upstairs again, the air seemed to loosen just enough for both of us to breathe. You should go, she said quietly. I stood, but not because I wanted to leave. That what you really want? Her lips pressed together. It's what makes sense. I stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the truth in my voice. You and I stopped making sense the second you slid your hand over mine. That made her look at me, a flash of something fierce in her eyes. And now? Now I know I can't undo this. I don't want to. The fight went out of her all at once, like she'd been holding it in for years. She leaned back into the couch, covering her face with her hands for a second before dropping them. I can't promise it'll be easy. I can't promise Evan won't hate us. Or that my ex won't try to make this ugly. I'm not asking for easy, I said. Just honest. Her gaze softened, and for a long moment neither of us moved. Then she reached out, not tentative this time, and took my hand, holding it in plain view. No hiding. No hesitation. It felt like the quietest kind of rebellion. We sat there in that small living room, two people who should have walked away but didn't, the weight of what we were choosing pressing in from every side. There was fear, sure. But there was also something steadier beneath it, the certainty that some connections aren't meant to be undone, no matter who disapproves. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Neither of us moved. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Text me when you get home, she said. I will. And then, before I could turn the handle, she leaned in and pressed her forehead to mine. No kiss. Just that, a quiet, solid promise that whatever came next, we'd face it together. I walked out into the cold night with my hands still warm from hers. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?